Very good afternoon to everyone. Let me introduce myself. My name is Deepak Jadhav, System Engineer for Veeam India. Today's webinar is for Microsoft 365 Backup Checklist. So on this particular webinar, we are more discussing on to the deployment flexibility, the storage flexibility, how we can take the backup of your 365 environment on the organization perspective, how we can run the backup for your other hybrid kind of model, whether on-premises servers are there, and how we can take those backup. And the major part onto those this particular webinar is to restore the data in terms of the mail PST, single mailbox recovery, OneDrive, Teams, or even onto the SharePoint. So first point is like deployment flexibility. So there are three ways to deploy your application, that is onto the O365 or your onto your Exchange. So your backup deployment should be able to run either on on-premises, either on a private cloud, or even onto public cloud environment. But the prerequisites remain same for those particular application perspective. So how your solution components work for your each environment should be very similar. So there are certain criteria which we require to provide onto the each and every domain perspective in terms of the authorization, in terms of the authentications. So we can deploy the solution on on-premises, we can deploy the solution on BaaS, or even onto the service provider deployments, or even onto the public cloud deployment like Microsoft Azure, AWS, Google, or even on IBM Cloud. Once we deploy the solution, where we can store the data, the backup policy, where we can store those particular backups onto the which kind of repository or which kind of storage. So our backup solution should support a variety of different storage options, whether you can say about the object storage, there are certain S3 containers and S3 buckets from the other public cloud vendors, or you can use the hybrid kind of model where you wanted to store the data onto your directly attached storage perspective, or you do already have any kind of investment onto your SAN storage box, so you can leverage that SAN storage box, or you already have any kind of NAS filers where you can add your NFS or the CIFS model like the SMB, that is for the server message block 3.0 protocol, which we can support it. So in addition to that, the solution should be flexible to allow you to move from one storage to another without any penalties. Now, today you have taken the backup on a S3 bucket. Now your organization said that we'll require the particular copy or the backup copy should be available on premises, that is onto my SAN storage box. Is your cloud vendor will provide such kind of copy? The answer is no. So in that scenario, without hampering any production data, without changing any kind of configuration, we can take the secondary copy from on cloud to on premises without disturbing any kind of storage platform. Now, in that scenario, whether we do require any kind of charges, the answer is no. Okay, so without penalties, you can pull the data from your cloud environment to your on premises servers. That is again, which we have just discussed now, that is for the object storage perspective. Those data store onto my S3 bucket, which you wanted to pull it onto my dash storage, the NAS storage, or even onto the SAN storage. Now, this will be part of your backup storage perspective where we can store the data. So previous slide, which we have discussed about the deployment part, where we can have our application on premises cloud or even on the private cloud. Now, there are certain customers, they are more approaching onto the hybrid. So they are given the certain users to access the data or they access their mails, OneDrives from the cloud itself. But there are the users who are sits in the office, they need to access their mailbox, their other components from the Exchange server. So rather than backing up the Microsoft 365 separately from your on-premises application, that is from the Microsoft Office application, it's better to use a single backup application that can simultaneously protect both the environments. So you don't require to install a two different kind of application to run the backup of your on-premises solution as well as your the cloud solution. That is for the SaaS-based model kind of solution. So Veeam, Microsoft 365 will give you the leverage to run the backup of both the modules, like onto the hybrid approach, where there are certain users are running on O65 or certain users are running on-premise, that is running on like the Exchange servers, which has the SharePoint as well. So you can run the backup for both the platform in the single console. So it can be difficult to predict what type of event might trigger the need for data recovery. So you require the secondary copy should be available on premises where we can recover the data from the cloud environments users. Those data will be recovered to directly onto my Exchange server without any kind of penalties or without any kind of the license informations. So it is important for a backup application to give you the maximum degree of flexibility. Along with the scalability, you will require the flexibility, because in storage perspective, we can provide the scalability to store the data at any platform. Along with that, we will provide you the flexibility to store the your backup of your or the Microsoft 365 application along with your on-premises Exchange server or your SharePoint. So taking a hybrid approach to backup can help to enhance flexibility for instance restoring on-premises mailbox to Microsoft 365 or vice versa. So we'll give you the flexibility to store your mailboxes or your OneDrive data directly onto your Microsoft Exchange server or even onto directly onto your O365 users. Now, what will be the control scope of backup? So make sure you can select the backup of entire organization or a specific users, groups, sites, teams, and the organizations. So whichever the object you want, you can select that. Or if you wanted to exclude certain users which you don't require any kind of backup for that particular users frameworks, you just exclude those particular users in terms of the mailbox, in terms of the other application like SharePoint, Teams, or even onto your OneDrive. So there are two approaches onto these scopes. Like if you wanted to add the entire organization application, in adding the organization application, you can able to add the teams, users, sites for your O65, or dynamically add with the Microsoft 365 groups. In that groups, you already have certain users are intact with that particular group perspective, so you can able to add that. Now, excluding the scope example, likewise, exclude the sites, teams, users, or even onto the certain groups from the O365 perspective. So you do have the entire control of your backup policies. Now you want to perform the backup policy to be enabled for your the top level management users which are resides on the O365 application, or you want a backup of your entire mailbox in the environment, whether it is onto O365, whether it is onto the on premises. So you do have the flexibility to choose what you want to run the backup for your user's perspective. A selected user's backup, which has the mailboxes, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint. Or there are certain selected users which you require only for the mailbox perspective, where you can run the backup for your mailboxes, not you are taking the backup for your Teams or the for your OneDrive or the SharePoint. So you will have the flexibility to run the or choose the backup policy as and when you want, or you can do the customizable, which whenever you require this particular address to be enabled for your user and machines. See, adopt a backup solution built for the teams. So before teams, no one is doing the teams backup. Okay, so everyone is focusing on to run the backup for your mailboxes. Like you are more keen to have the backup of your mailboxes for the certain users or the entire groups. So there are users who are doing the archiving of those particular mailboxes, and those particular mailboxes are stored into your PSD files. But there are certain users they are archiving onto directly onto the Microsoft 365 application. So they are thinking about that this particular data will be stored onto the archive, but accidentally or any kind of correction happen to your mails, that the mails are deleted from your mailbox. Microsoft will not give any kind of assurance or any kind of guarantee to store the data for their repository. They will give you the assurance about the application availability, that is for your application like Exchange or the O65 or the OneDrive or the SharePoint or the even onto the Teams, because Teams is more important for today's generation to creating the channels, to creating, to meeting with the other customers or your internal team members. So there are certain chats are sharing with these particular groups, there are certain files are shared over that particular teams. So have you ever taken the teams as a backup? Because we are just focusing onto the mailbox, but for the compliance perspective, for the litigation of the compliance or the regulatory of your the group, we will require the backup of your entire organization unit perspective. So in terms of the teams, we can create take the backup of your exchange online, that will have your contacts, your calendars, meetings, everything will be intact with the exchange, and we will store those data onto my backup repository. In top of that, there are certain SharePoint online which we are sharing the certain files to your users, to your groups, to your youth, with your meetings which we have started with your colleagues itself. So you'll require the backup of your team files, OneNote saved in the SharePoint tabs. Now you will require the backup for your OneDrive for your business. So likewise, you have shared the files with your OneDrive for your other customers or your the other colleagues, or you have shared with the chat files as well. So whatever the discussion happen over the team chat, you will require such kind of chats to be backed up in a such a way that in case of any kind of compliance happen, in case of any kind of litigation is required or the regulatory required, you will be able to to provide such kind of chats from your backup repository to your team's channels. Because we can, as a user, we can chat onto our teams, but I can have the access to delete those particular chats. I can say that, boss, I have not deleted anything, but it is automatically deleted or they accidentally deleted. As a user, I can say that, but as a system admin, as a backup admin, you do have the all the control of your O65 application, where we can run the backup of your teams along with your OneDrive, along with your SharePoint, and also the exchange. So we'll get all the footprint of your applications backup will be stored onto your backup repository. And this backup repository could be anywhere. Like as I said, first copy will be on my the Azure Blob Storage or the S3 bucket, or even I can store the data from that particular perspective to have the compliance regulation perspective. I can store those data onto my on premises as well. First thing, let customer will ask you about what is my SLA. So I'll require a minimum kind of downtime. I won't be able to give any kind of deletion happen onto my exchange level or even onto my O65 level. So consider the appropriate recovery point objective, that is called the RPO, and the recovery time objective, like that is called the RTO, for your Microsoft 365 environment. Make sure your backup solution can deliver on them. Now in IT, the RTO and the RPO is the more crucial word for your entire business continuity. So such kind of business continuity, what you require, you need to your match your SLAs. So how you are going to match your SLA? You do require to set the policy for your RTO and the RPOs. Like how quickly I can able to recover my mailbox or the certain mails or the certain entire mailbox perspective or even on the certain document perspective. How quickly I can able to restore that. So that will be my RPO, like the definition which we have mentioned here, like the RPO will determine the frequency with which backups are created. determining the maximum amount of data that could potentially be lost between backups. So in this particular definition, here we can define the policy. Like if I say I will take the backup every day, twice in a day, let's example. So what will by RPO? Like twice in a day, let's example 9 to 6 hours is my working hours, and I have scheduled the backup policy for 9 to 6 in twice in a day. So my RPO will be around 3 hours, 4 hours, where the data will be created. But this will be a function onto your when your data is on premises. But today's users are roamingly users are available, so they can access their mails from the mobiles, they can access their mails from the tabs or the laptops. So you don't have any control to provide such kind of backup for such kind of short period. Okay, so how you are going to the prevent the RPO, like how you can match your RPO for the customer's perspective. So we can define the policy like the every 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes we do have the backup of your O65. So whatever the mailbox are created for users, whether it is on-premises user or the roaming users, or those are the users are only accessing the data from their VPN connections, or those are the users are only access from their BYOD devices. So every 30 minutes, I have the policy to run the backup of my system that is onto my application. So what are the loss? Say hardly 30 minutes of the loss. Even to that, I can schedule the policy for every 15 minutes. So my RPO, which is suffice from the customer's end side, like the 15 minutes of the RPO point. Now I have set the policy for the 15 minutes or the 30 minutes kind of backup, which we trigger the backup from my application and storing onto my repository. But in case of any deletion happen, in case of any disaster happen to my environment, whether I can give you the those particular data as quickly as possible, then I can able to match my RTO time frame. If customer is saying that boss, I do have the RTO of the 4 hours, so I can just give you the hypothetical 4 hours time frame because my entire business is running on my mailbox. So I am working as a sales organization, so entire stuff will be running onto my mailbox perspective. So I will share my codes, I will share my the purchase orders, or I will create the certain documents sharing to the other customers or the vendors or the other users. If anything goes wrong onto my mailbox, my entire business will be lost. So I won't be able to handle such kind of time frame to create or to resume my users to log in onto my servers. So how we can match that? So the RTO pertains to the length of the time that it will take to restore a backup and normal operation to resume for users. So we will give you the guarantee assurance about the RTO, how quickly you can recover the data for your entire mailboxes. If let's example, the on-premises Exchange server is down and you wanted to recover your entire mailbox onto the on-premises, so you can able to recover the data as quickly as possible with the help of Veeam application or the Veeam backup software. Even onto the same of files like the on O65, as Microsoft have given you the commitment of the application availability of O65. So there are certain chances to delete the data from the O65 perspective, like the users have deleting their mails. Microsoft will give you the access of your mails, which will be resides onto their storage for maximum of 15 to 30 days. This is based on your licensing terms. Okay. So if Microsoft after the 15 or 30 days, they are deleting the data which is stored onto their recycle bin. They have flushed out from the recycle bin and the data will be removed from the Microsoft side. So that's the reason in Microsoft Take Note, they have mentioned about that the customer will take care of their backup data for their own, or they can use the third party application to run the backup of their applications, that is for their mailboxes. Microsoft will not take any kind of ownership for their backup of data. They will take the ownership of the application consistency, application availability, application flexibility. They will take the ownership for that particular file parts, but they will not take any kind of ownership onto their backup data. So if you search onto Microsoft site for their O365 backup model, they will clearly mention about user will take the or the customer will take the ownership of your backup data. Now, how we can recover those data? So recovery options are more important. Like you should have many options to get Microsoft 365 data back the way your business requires. So restore capabilities your solution should have. So in Veeam application, you have the 45 ways to recover your data. So the data could be your mailbox, data could be your SharePoint, could be your Teams, could be your OneDrive. So either you can restore to original location, or you wanted to create that particular PST file for your mailbox, or you wanted to redirect to other location for your the OneDrive files, the team chat. You do have the privilege to do that. So restore file or the object to prior version. So I do have the multiple. Let's example as I given you the 30 minutes of backup window time frame. So in that particular scenario, I do have the multiple number of the backup copies will be available onto my storage, that is onto my repository. So I can recover every 30 minutes kind of data. So let's example 130, 230, 330. So such kind of recovery points will be available onto my storage. So I can restore a files or the object to prior version. So whichever the versions I do want or the customer want, they can able to recover that. Or restore it and overwrite to users, folders, or the files. Save multiple files as a zip. Save individual files, objects files. Restore missing or change items. Exporting post as a HTML, PST files. So if let's example, I am the user, as I said, I have accidentally deleted my mailbox. I wanted to create the PST file instead of doing the restoration onto my mailbox itself. You can just provide me the PST. As a compliance, instead of doing the restoration onto my mailbox, I can create the PST file as well. So that PST file, while generating that PST file, I do have the all the control about my restoration data. So I can share that PST file to the user, sharing the OneDrive path or whatever the mechanism I do have, I can share that. Or if a single mailbox recover, single mails is recovered requirement, then we can have the send file as attachment or the MSG file, or even we can give you the access. Now, the good part of this particular O365, that is for the Veeam backup for O365 level. Now, think about that you do have the more than 1,000 number of users, and every time there are few users are deleting their mails, or they are required their certain mails to be recovered. Now your system admin or the backup admin, they will generate the certain ticket, that is from the service desk perspective. They will generate the tickets to the system admin to saying that, "Ki boss, last week on Thursday, I do miss my certain mails. I have deleted certain mails. I require that." Now think about the your system admin job, right? Because he is not only handling the O365, he is handling the entire data center. So along with the O365, he is managing the other applications as well, along with the backup application, along with the O365. Along with that, the other application model like the databases or other kind of stuff. So if every day, if there are 10 to 20 users are requesting to recover the data from their deleted happen, or the accidentally deleted mails, or the certain corruption happen onto their mailbox, or the certain things that happen onto that. So you do require to add more number of the manpowers to restore those particular stuff. So the Veeam application will provide you the access for the self-service restore, where user can recover their only their mails or the other the application like the OneDrive or even onto your the SharePoint or the Teams. They do have the portal where they can log into their Active Directory authentication. So with this O365 application, the Veeam application can be integrated with your SSO, that is onto the Active Directory, either Azure Active Directory, either onto the on-premises AD. So we can integrate with that, and using this particular authentication, they can have the access to their data which is stored onto my repository, that is onto Veeam backup repository. So they can only access for their own mails. So whichever the mails are deleted from their mailbox, they can able to see the data onto backup repository, and they can access the data, and they can recover it onto the original location. Or if they want to be create a PST file, they can create the PST file as well. So providing the self-service restore, which will not a burden to your system admin. Okay, so system admin will not require any kind of request from the user and machines to recover this particular data. So you can provide the access to the user and machines to self-service restore, so they can able to recover that. So you can create such policy for your user set of users to restore the data. If there are certain users which you don't require to provide such kind of access to those users, so you do have the customizable options available. So you can prevent those users to not restore the data. They can directly come on to the system admin, generate the tickets, and recover the data from the system admin perspective. So as I said earlier, there are 45 ways to recover the data in terms of the single file folder, in terms of the single mail, PST files, in terms of the chats, in terms of your team's channels. So everything can be possible. So use backup to augment e-discovery, the major part onto the e-discovery. Likewise, there are 1,000 mails are coming into my mailbox. If one or two mails are deleted, I don't know about the what is there into my mailbox, but I am aware about the date, time, or the mail subject, or that particular message body. So I do have the e-discovery option to search the mails from my mailbox to recover the data from my repository. So I can exploring my backup jobs. So jobs, when they exploring backup jobs, you should be able to load the latest restore points. As I said, I do have the multiple number of the recovery points are available into my the repository. So from that repository, I can pick and choose whichever the data I want. Okay, so the restore point that was created by the selected jobs, I can able to recover the mails, mailbox, everything onto my repository perspective. Now in terms of the exploring single organization, like when exploring a single organization, you should be able to load the merge and load the latest restore points that have been created by each backup jobs of the selected organization. Or exploring all organization, where I can explore the all organization. So all organization is where I required onto the O65. So you should be able to merge and load the latest restore points of each backup jobs of every organization perspective. Or even you do have the access of the point in time backup. So like the point in time backup, you should be able to load the when the point in time state, for example the latest available state or the point in time. So you do have the multiple number of the recovery points available onto your console, where you want, or whichever the data you want, you can select that and you can restore it onto your mailbox or your onto your teams. So what Veeam backup for Microsoft 365? Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 limits the risk of losing access to your Microsoft 365 data, including your Exchange Online. As I said about the hybrid versions, where we can run the backup of your Exchange Online server or the Exchange servers, the SharePoint Online, OneDrive for business, and the Microsoft Teams. Now coming to this, what is the security which we have? So likewise, the data which we are going to store it onto my repository, that is onto my Azure bucket, or on premises, that data will be in the encrypted format. So whatever the data which we are going to store, this will be on the encryption enabled. So securely backup to any location, including on-premises, cost-effective cloud object storage. Now today you are taken the backup of the Azure blob storage. Now you want this will be giving you the high cost. Now you want either on to push it onto my on-premises, either onto you can push it onto the other cloud vendor storage as well, like the S3 buckets, which the Amazon are providing, like the Glacier kind of stuff, where the deep archival you do have. So you can push the data from the Azure blob to your other vendor of the cloud vendors, like the AWS or the Google, or your to other IBM cloud. So Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 will protect your Microsoft 365 data from accidental deletions, security threats, retention policy gaps. Likewise, as I said, if I wanted to store a year's retention on my Azure blob, which will give me the cost to storing those data. So I can provide you the scalability option from that Azure blob to other S3 buckets or the on-premises to retain your data for longer term retention perspective. As a government customer, as a pharma customer, as a manufacturer customers, they do require they do need to follow the certain compliances or the certain regulations. Due to the certain litigations happen to their in the company perspective, they need to store the data for longer term. So using this particular technology, you can able to store the data on longer term retention policy wise. Quickly restore the individual Microsoft 365 items and files with industry leading recovery flexibility. Again, I'm saying there are 45 ways to recover your applications data. Meet legal and compliance requirement with efficient e-discovery of Microsoft 365 backup data, where I can search the mails, search the data based on my rules. Okay, so I will just give you certain heads up onto the Microsoft 365 points, like how we can take the backups and how we can run the backups as well. So this is my Microsoft 365 console where I can have my I have added my Microsoft 365 organization. In that 365 organization, I can able to see this Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, or OneDrive for Business, Microsoft Teams. If I do have the multiple options are available like the hybrid, so I can able to add my Exchange Online, Exchange servers as well along with the SharePoint server and the Microsoft Teams. So I do have the access of hybrid as well as O365. So in that particular terms, once we added the organization, I do require to add my storage. So this is my backup repository. So in that backup repository, I can store the data onto my AWS repository. Either I can store the data onto my O365 or I can extend it onto my Glacier. Okay. So if I edit that, I do require to provide the data should be available for my O365, which will be stored onto my repository itself. And I can retain this policy for 90 days. After the 90 days, it will be do the copy onto my Azure or the AWS Glacier. To without hampering any performance or any kind of degradation happen onto Euro 365, we will require the backup proxy. So where we can create the backup proxy to run the backup of your O365, which will be creating the while running the backup of your O365, it will take the backup using the proxy servers and will be store the data onto my repository itself. So once we added the organization, you can able to see the what are the options are available, like the options like O365 Exchange, where I can add that. Here I have added the O365 organization. I can exclude the users which I don't want. I can create the backup proxy and the backup repository where I do store my 90 days of data. I can run the backup every hour or periodically every 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. So I do have the minimum kind of RPO I can set it for this particular policy. Likewise, I can have the OneDrive backup where I can add the OneDrive as a backup perspective. So these are the options are available and we can create the policy for your OneDrive SharePoint Teams. Okay. Now the question is that how we can create the copy job. Likewise, here I have mentioned about the copy job. This will be my target backup repository. This will be an extended copy, which we are going to store it. So whenever the first copy will be done, that is on to from my AWS to your AWS S3 bucket to AWS Glacier. Now this part is clear onto my backup part. Now there are options are available from the Explorer perspective. So this is the another window which we can open it from the Veeam Explorer perspective, where I can see what is the data is available onto my backup. So this is my Microsoft O365 organization unit. In that organization unit, I can able to see what are the mails are created or the mailbox are created. So if I click onto the test 2, I can see what are the archives backups are there, or what are the calendars, the inbox, notes, outbox, everything which is intact with that particular mailbox. I have access to run the backup of the all the mailbox perspective. So likewise, if I have clicked on to the test, I can restore the item to directly onto the test user or restore to the other mailbox or export to the item like the PST file or the desktop to inbox or PST. Or I can provide the same item to the other vendor as well, send to mailbox items. Okay, so those are the facility can be available in my O365. Similar way, if I wanted to recover the data for my SharePoint or the OneDrive perspective, let's example, I have just click onto the OneDrive. So I can use the latest available state or the use of following point in time. So I can select the which are the data is available into my point in time perspective. So I can select that. So I'll just select the use the latest available state and I will browse it. So it will give you the access of the OneDrive organization's perspective and the user-wise perspective. So here I do have the organization unit and these are the users having their OneDrive access. Okay, so if I click onto the one, so these are the attachments. These are the Microsoft Team chats. Hope you guys aware about that. Whatever we have chatting onto our Microsoft Teams, these chats will be stored onto your OneDrive account. So now, in case if you have missed any chats or you have deleted any chats, you have the access to recover the data from the chats from the OneDrive itself. Likewise, if I click onto this, restore document, overwrite or keep, copy document to whichever the authentication like you have, you can provide that and you can mention about this particular authentication. Or you wanted to send the document to your SMTP server, so you can configure the SMTP access and send the data to your or the respective users. So if you want, you can start finding using the certain categories, fields, conditions, value. So this will be a provide you the e-discovery item for your teams. So I just missed on to this particular point about the exchange, where you can able to find out the mails using the advanced find. Like all fields, you can have these certain rules where whatever the rules you are mentioning, so such kind of rules you can mention it, like BCC or these are the rules you can mention and the conditions and the value. So based on your value and the conditions, we can able to find out the each and every mails for your users and we can able to record those mails using the recover option. Similar way, we do have the option to recover your team's point in time backup. So these are my team channels, posts, files. So whatever the test users you have shared with the teams regards to the files which you are sharing onto the team's channels, so those kind of backup can be happen using the team's mechanisms. So along with that, we do have the self-service restore. This portal will give you the access of the your username, then you can log in with your user and the password. So I'll just click onto the one of the user. To now, once you provide the access to your self-service users to your user perspective, so user can log into their mailboxes, they log into their archives, or you are onto the OneDrive. So they can have the access of your inbox. So these are the mails are there. So if there are users are required, so they can simply select that and restore it. So restore wherever we want. Can restore move to restore the original location or to new locations, and why they want. So they need to provide the reasons as well. So after providing such kind of reasons, they can able to restore that to their users perspective. So these are the facility which we can provide you on to the mailbox uh, archival or the backup perspective or the recovery perspective. So Veeam will provide you the 45 ways to recover your data for your teams, for your OneDrive, for your mailbox, or even to SharePoint. So now coming to the again onto the slides. So these are the customers what our customers say like the get Veeam backup for Microsoft 365. You will love it. Simple to use, simple to implement onto your cloud environment or even onto your on-premises environment. You can easily install it, you can easily configure it, and you can add your organization units, and you can able to run the backup for your applications. So there are certain reads which you can pull it from this particular link, or you can just get the QR code accessible, and you can able to find out the Microsoft Teams backup using this particular ebook. So Microsoft 365 backup guide, this link we will be able to find out, and this will give you the in-depth information about the installation packages information, installation process, infrastructure planning, the prerequisites for your on-premises, for your cloud, or even onto the private cloud itself. Okay, as I in first slide I have already mentioned about, if your date you wanted to implement Veeam application, the Veeam backup software for Microsoft 365, the prerequisite remains same for the all the platform, whether it is public cloud, whether it is private cloud, or even onto the on-premises. Okay, so you do require certain prerequisites need to be followed with such this particular document, where they will give you the access of the authorization permission, certain ports requirement, certain authentication requirement, and once you follow the all the prerequisites, you are done with your backup methodology. So you can able to run the backup of your O365, or else you can just simply go onto the beam.com on products. You can able to see this particular Microsoft Office 365, and you can download the trial version. This trial version will be available for your 30 days, and you can install it on your test environment, or if you want, you can install it onto your production environment, or you can just reach out to us for the any other help is required for your environment perspective. We will give you the certain knowledge transfer for your O365, and you can just simply log into the O365 console and run the backup of your mailbox perspective, or even onto your other application perspectives. You just need to log into the go.veeam.com/backoffice 365, and you can able to run the backup of your products, or simply just scan this particular QR code and you can run the backup of your applications. So it's a pretty simple to download the package, install it. Before installing, just run through the prerequisite documents, and install this particular software to your on-premise or your cloud environment. So before going on to the questions and answer, I just wanted to highlight these points once again, summarize this particular webinar. Like we have just discussing on to the deployment options, like deployment flexibility, storage flexibility, hybrid approach for backups, then how we can control the scope of backup in terms of the Teams applications, in terms of the OneDrive, then how we can create the backup policy for your Microsoft Teams where they can able to store the data for your calendar meetings, your OneNotes, your chat files. Then we have discussed about your RTO and the
Yeah,
RPOs.
better.
And there are multiple ways to recover your options, which is more important, is required to recover your data. So you wanted to match your SLAs for in terms of your RPO and RTO, then the recovery option is more important. And the last part of that, we have discussed about your e-discovery part, where the augmentation for your e-discovery, where how we can able to scan the mails or the OneDrive files or the chat files or the SharePoints. We can have those particular access from the self-service perspective or even onto the management perspective. So these are the points which we have discussed, and I hope you like the session. So Jayati, over to you.
Yeah, Deepak. Thanks for such a great session. We have a question from Mr. Jogesh Nayak. His question is how to take SharePoint online data. Is there any tool which is required? Please guide.
Yeah, so once you install the O365 application onto the cloud itself, so it will give you the privilege to access or recover the data or they take the backup of your online SharePoint. Okay.
And
So if it is,
the next,
yeah,
okay, sorry, please go ahead.
yeah. So if it is the O365 module, so you do once you go enable the O365 module for Veeam application perspective, you can able to run the backup. If your SharePoint is on premises, so we do have the VBR as a application where we can run the backup of your on the on premises SharePoint application. Yeah, Jayati, go ahead.
So, from same person, we have another question. He's asking how to connect you and want to use this tool for your business.
Sorry, which tool?
How to connect with you if they want to use this tool for your business. This is the question from Mr. Jugesh.
Mr. Yogesh, I have not clearly understand this question. Can you just repeat it again?
Jogesh, we will request you to please write the question again. Next question is from Mr. Dharmesh Prajapati. His question is, can we take backup to directly on cloud or we require any on-premise platform for repository?
No. So for the O365 backup, I can able to run the backup directly on cloud, but that is onto the Azure Blob Storage or the S3 bucket. Okay.
Next question is from Mr. Annadurai. His question is, time will be vary for the image SharePoint data file.
No. So once we run the backup for your entire application, the time will be remain same. So it depends on the how much data is available onto each and every modules. Let's example your Exchange mailbox having the data is huge, and the remaining application is minimum. So the time varies depending on the data size. Yeah, Jay, the next question.
Next question is from Mr. Paresh. His question is, can we take backup of PST and file for every user?
So for PST backup, this is on your desktop and laptop. So we have the other model that is for the workstation backup, that is for your desktop and laptop backup. So this particular model will take the backup of your users PST backup from their endpoint devices. So O365 will give you the online database backup of your Exchange or other applications. It will not intact with your endpoint devices. It will just have the access of your organization unit. If you want to more keen or for your endpoint backup, please reach out to us for the endpoint backup perspective, where we can able to run the backup of your OAuth, the PST files which user are creating onto their desktops or the laptops. I hope the answer is clear to you.
Right. Next question is from Mr. Annadurai. He's saying, how about ransom virus on cloud as well as on prem?
Yeah, so from the storage perspective, there is the object log is available while creating the backup onto my directly push it onto my cloud itself. So those data will be object log. So the data will be written onto my object storage or the cloud storage. This will be in the ransomware protected repository. But you do require that particular feature to be enabled onto my cloud storage, that is onto Azure Blob Storage or the S3 buckets, the object log.
Right.
Yeah, Jay.
Next question is from Mr. Rahul Johari. He's saying, can I take Office 365 backup in our local storage instead of cloud?
Yeah, you can. You can take the backup of, you can install the Microsoft Veeam application onto on-premises and storage onto your dashbox or the sandbox or whatever the storage which you have provided, and you can run the backup from O365 directly onto store it onto on-premise. Clear?
Mr. Annadurai has also mentioned will be a separate SKQ.
Will be a separate SKU.
SKU, yeah.
From the licensing perspective, yes, it will require a separate licensing module for Microsoft 365 Veeam application. So this license will be based on the number of users.
Right.
Clear?
Next question is from Mr. Rahul Johari. What is dead up and comparison ratio?
Compression ratio or comparison ratio?
It's comparison ratio. This
Not
is what.
clearly. Yeah.
Rahul, can you please send your question again? Next question is from Mr. Gagan Arora. What is data deduplication and compression size?
So we will give you the deduplication compression based on the files, basis on the attachment, but you will get the 2:1 kind of dedupe and compression will be available while running the backup of 465.
Next question is from Mr. Rajendran. Is there any chances in Outlook users from September 2022 version authentication, etc.? Is there any changes? Sorry.
As of now, there is no any changes are being made from the Microsoft side, so you don't require any kind of changes for that.
Right. Okay. Next question is from Mr. Gagan itself, which you just answered. He's asking like if it's 1 GB, so what is size?
If your mailbox is 1 GB, so if let's example 600 MB to 700 MB kind of data will be stored onto my repository. So this will be a first copy. Later on, it will be incremental copies will be stored. So we'll get higher number of dedupe and compression.
Right. Okay. Next question is from Mr. Utkarsh. He's asking that I guess these backups will be over internet. How we will ensure these backups are secured? How will be the bandwidth calculations done, as it will be using internet to connect O365? Can you please put some light on target size of the storage required with standard backup policy?
Yeah, so before sizing this particular backup sizing, we will run the certain tool onto your O365 organization unit, where we can get the actual data of your mailbox, Teams, and the OneDrive. whichever the important data you want, we can create those particular data. So basis on that particular calculation, we will provide you the sizing basis on the retention period and the link required to copy the data onto on premises over the internet, or if the data will be resides onto my cloud storage itself, then I don't require any kind of bandwidth because the data will be stored into the Azure cloud itself.
All right. Next question is again from Mr. Rahul Johri. He's asking, can I take incremental differential backup of Office 365?
No, so this will be a incremental backup, not the differential backup.
Right.
We can do
Next
that.
question is, okay, shall I go ahead with next question?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's from Mr. Harish Ekambaram. His question is, currently we are using Veeam Backup Build 11 version. O365 need additional license for the same?
Yes. The current version of Veeam 11, that is for the Veeam Universal License, which you already have, that will be taken care of your the on-premises servers, the virtualization or the cloud backups environment. But for the O365, we do have the other SKU that is for the user-based license, which will require the purchases from the Veeam.
Right.
So
That's all, Deepak. We don't have any more questions. I hope we have addressed each one of them. Thank you for such a nice session and hope to see our attendance again for the next session soon. Right?
yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
everyone. Thank you so much for joining this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.